Hello, I'm Olivia Mattis. I'm delighted to welcome you this afternoon to another one of our Sunday programs on stories of rescue, resistance, and hope. We haven't been together for quite some time. Last time was in mid-June. That's because I just returned from Portugal, where I was co-leading our Educators Institute on rescue and resistance during the Holocaust. And it was an exhilarating experience. We had American teachers and Portuguese teachers, and we'll be doing it again next year. So if you know of any educator or museum docent who would benefit from this professional development opportunity, please send them our way. Today we're highlighting a wonderful new book. Here it is. It's called A Force for Good, Gisela Warburg Wyzanski, A Life Dedicated to the Rescue of Children by Anita Wyzanski Robboy. And she will be formally introduced by Joan Goodman, who will be in dialogue with our author, Anita. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Joan Goodman. Before I do, I just want to tell you, please do put your questions into that chat box. You will remain muted for the duration of the hour, but we will be gathering your questions. I will be serving as your moderator, so at the right point in the program, I will be gathering your questions and asking them of our author. So in dialogue with Anita is Joan Goodman, who is the Director of Lay Leadership at the Jewish Theological Seminary. And previously, she was the Director of Development at the Academy of Jewish Religion in New York. In her first career, she was a television news anchor and reporter at stations in Hartford, Connecticut, and Springfield, Massachusetts. She's a graduate of Smith College. I'm delighted to have her here today. Joan, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Olivia, and to everyone involved in the Sousa Mendez Foundation, and especially for your good work, too. And thank you for inviting our guest author, Anita Wyzanski Robboy, to discuss really her remarkable book about her remarkable mother. Anita Wyzanski Robboy is a practicing attorney in the Boston area for the law firm Prince Lobel Tye. She's been doing that for over 50 years. She has been an author of books, but for lawyers, and this book is her first book that is a biography. Anita is a visiting scholar at Brandeis University, and she was also the visiting scholar for 2 years at Cambridge University in England. And this afternoon, Anita and I are going to be in conversation for about half an hour, and she's going to tell the story of her mother and her rescue mission. And when our conversation finishes, Olivia will rejoin us, and she will, as you know, be able to take your questions. So now it's my privilege and joy to chat with someone who has become my friend, and that is Anita Wyzanski Robboy. Anita, that you have titled your book A Force for Good. Gisela Warburg Wyzanski, she was a force, and she definitely worked for the good of humanity. Can you give us, before we begin, a brief summary of the book?
I'll be delighted to do that, and I want to thank you, and I want to thank the Sousa Mendez Foundation for giving me this opportunity to speak about my remarkable mother, who really is an example of an individual who can make a huge difference in a difficult time. What I would like to say about her as a summary is she was born in 1912, the fifth child of the wealthiest German Jewish banking family, the Warburgs. In 1929, she and her parents traveled with Chaim and Vera Weizmann to Palestine. After she did so, she became an ardent Zionist. Her saving of thousands of children occurred in primarily two settings in Europe. The first one was with Youth Aliyah, which was co-founded by Henrietta Szold, who, as most of you know, was the founder of Hadassah here. She worked as co-director in the Berlin office from 1935 to 1938, saving thousands of children, obtaining permits, dealing with the change in the routes as Hitler took over more and more of Europe. Then in 1938, she went to London and worked with a kinder transport from 38 to 39. In 39, she came to the United States and was the national chairman of Hadassah Youth Aliyah and went to 46 different states in the United States, raising money for Youth Aliyah and Jews in Europe. She remained working for Hadassah all of her life, and later in her life, she was the chairman of UNICEF in the Boston office, founder of Fellowship for Arab Jewish children, and at least 15 other important organizations on the Northeast.
Really, truly was a force, without a doubt. Anita, how did you come to actually write the book?
Well, actually, Joan, I had no intention of writing a biography of my mother. What happened is, as many of us experienced, on March 13th, 2020, we were sent home because of the pandemic. So I was to work remotely for the law firm of 110 lawyers. And I said at that time, I should finally deal with a fire hazard in the attic. My mother died in 1991, my father in 1986. And my brother and I took a year to clean out their house. They were not hoarders, but they certainly were savers. And they knew they were each historically important. So it took us the year to get my father's documents to Harvard Law School and the Mass Historical Society because he was the chief judge of the federal court in the Massachusetts. And then we finally got to the attic after dealing with the 10,000 books my father had collected and the 100 pipes and all of his various collections. And I turned out to have the larger attic. So 19 boxes filled with documents and papers landed in my attic and sat there from 1991 till 2020. And it was clear that it was a fire hazard. The first 10 boxes had every report card of my brother and myself, every letter we ever wrote, etc. And then the last 9 boxes had documents my mother had saved from when she was the time she was actually born, her birth certificate, through the time she died. And the historical documents were amazing. 46 original letters from Chaim Weizmann, 20 original letters from Henrietta Szold, letters from Youth Aliyah applicants, discussions of the routes, the permit difficulties, and on and on. And I knew this story had to be told. So I became a visiting scholar at Brandeis, and I had the fabulous good fortune of having as my mentor Professor Jonathan Sarna, and he helped me shape this biography. And that is how I came to write it, the story.
It's really quite amazing. I mean, you must have been shocked discovering this. I mean, what was the biggest surprise to you when you opened up these boxes?
It's hard to say, Joan. I mean, it was riveting. It was exciting. I knew a lot because I had been in Israel in 1967 teaching at the first youth village of the first Youth Aliyah youth village, Ben Shemen. But I had no idea of the details of what it was like, of my mother's being taken to the Gestapo, what that was like. The actual stories of the Youth Aliyah children were riveting. So much was what I didn't know. And I had no idea that there would be 46 letters from Chaim Weizmann written to a 17-year-old, which is the age my mother was when their forever relationship began, from a man who was in his 50s, or the intimate personal and professional letters of Henrietta Szold to my mother, and the and numerous documents. And letters between my parents, my mother and her parents, and numerous other letters.
Let's talk about those two major Jewish historical figures, Chaim Weizmann and Henrietta Szold. Many of us know about them, but what does your book teach us? What do we not know that we could
Okay.
learn in your book?
All right. Well, the book is remarkable in that it is really contemporary history. Is what did Henrietta Szold and Chaim Weizmann think about Zionism, about Hitler during each year? Because they wrote to my mother their political thoughts. And usually you don't get to hear what famous people were really thinking. You hear the public version. So contemporaneous history gives you an intimate picture. Chaim Weizmann did not persuade my grandfather to become a Zionist. He was a persistent man, and he took the Warburgs on a trip to Palestine. He also knew he was very charming, and women liked him. So if he could not persuade the men to be Zionists, he persuaded the women. He befriended the Rothschild women. He befriended the Warburg women. He, in fact, had a 2-year affair with my mother's oldest sister. And he knew that there were many ways to skin a cat. And he was able to get the Balfour Declaration through because he was very creative in the various ways to reach people. You also see how he related to somebody so much younger. He saw my mother as being the same age as his child. And how did he nurture her Zionism? And how did he encourage it? With regard to Henrietta Szold, we think of her as a woman with a purpose. But in fact, there's a scene my mother describes where they shared a bedroom. She wanted to know if she was going to snore. She her she wouldn't let my mother at 17 carry her suitcase. So my mother writes to her parents, she's as stubborn as a donkey. And would you believe what she does in the morning? She gets up at 5:30, and we don't think of Henrietta Szold as being vain, but she brushes her hair 50 times every morning, and she does all her bills and her correspondence, and then she does calisthenics. So again, it's these intimate pictures. And as if you have read David McCullough's book about History Matters, people who live at a time don't really know what the future will bring. David McCullough says the future is determined by individuals, leaders who may emerge, and luck. You really sense that my grandfather, Max, who was a banker in the know on financial committees, really didn't understand the power that Hitler would wield, nor did Chaim Weizmann nor Henrietta Szold, which is information you garner from their correspondence.
Okay, thank you. And there is a third character in your book that people probably haven't heard about, but he played a very influential role in your mother's life, Rudolf Sonnenborg. Who is he and what was his role?
Okay. Rudolf Sonnenborn was a very committed, important Zionist. He grew up in Baltimore. He came from a very wealthy family that was involved with oil, the oil business. He is the person who was most responsible for bonds for Palestine. He later in his life became president of CJP, and he was the man to whom Ben-Gurion turned in 1945 when he foresaw that there would be riots. And he asked Rudolph to raise millions of dollars in this country for armaments for the Haganah. My mother's connection with him was that she was in love with him. She was 28. She wanted to marry him. He was in every way what she wanted, a committed Zionist, He had known Henrietta Szold. The problem was he was in his 40s and he was not the marrying type. And my mother's family and friends said, Gisela, you need to move on. He's a charming man, but he's not going to commit. Unbeknownst to my mother, she was fixed up with a brilliant, newly appointed judge by the name of Judge Charles Edward Wyzanski. And up in the attic are the courtship papers of their triangle. A committed Zionist in one corner, but not a man who was likely to commit, and a man who was likely to commit, but believed in the Constitution rather than the Torah or the Talmud. So it is a wonderful inside view of a triangle. And also, as my mother said to my father, we have a Jewish problem because clearly they were Jews from very different backgrounds. My father had experienced quotas in Boston as he was growing up. He was born in 1906. Harvard had a quota, Exeter had a quota, country clubs didn't permit Jews. They were segregated, just as graveyards were segregated. So being Jewish, he never denied, but it didn't help his ambitions. So today, again, we have many couples where they see the Jewish problems of Zionism, Israel, and the kind of religion that they want to practice differently. So it's a contemporary problem today.
Yeah. And speaking of contemporary problems, the book, A Force for Good, is clearly set in a certain time period. Holocaust, pre-World War II in Europe, and then, of course, the founding of the State of Israel. So what does the book teach us, or what is the relevance of this history today?
Okay, I'm delighted you asked. First of all, there are autocrats and dictators all over the world. They know the playbook of Hitler. The playbook of Hitler is discussed in the book. Take over social media, take over the parliament, take over the judiciary, take over the press. And if you can't take over the military, form your own. And today we have ISIS as opposed to the Gestapo and so on. So it's relevant in terms of the way autocrats and dictators destroy or attempt to destroy a democracy. The story of Youth is extremely relevant today because we have millions of children who have not been in school thanks to the Ukraine war, the war in Gaza and Israel. They've seen nothing but war and don't trust humanity. Youth dealt for the first time as a large social agency with the enormous task of trying to educate children who spoke different languages, had learned to steal, and did not believe in community or humanity. All over the world today, we have children like that in Somalia and elsewhere. The book details how Youth morphed as the war continued, because originally the children came with suitcases and from upper class families, middle class families seeking to leave Germany in 33. They knew they'd just been kicked out of public schools by Hitler, but they had been schooled within the month, and they knew both their parents. That was not true during the war or after the war of the children that Youth Aliyah took care of. Similarly, the kinder transport. My mother had the task of placing 10,000, or one of the people placing 10,000 Jewish children in foster homes. There was no training in England about how to be a foster parent. There was no vetting of these parents. My mother wrote a long letter to Hadassah describing how it was like a slave market. The blue-eyed, blonde-haired children were picked first. The older boys nobody wanted. It's like what happens here with adoption. The book is filled with original contemporaneous observations of what working with a Kindertransport was like day to day, and about the children who came, exactly the countries they came from, how they were chosen, the details that we all would like to know and seldom see, both for Youth Aliyah and for the Kindertransport. The next way that the book is relevant is that really I was blessed to have this amazing treasure trove of documents, but mostly, or most of us know our family history from conversations with our parents and grandparents. Historically, we have passed on our traditions through the oral mode. I really urge the listeners to tell their children and grandchildren whatever they know about their family, because without doing so, it will be lost forever. And the grandchildren may not want to get off their devices, but if they need to persuade them to listen, because they will be grateful later that they know something about their past. And I can only say it was an enormous blessing to be able to receive this material and know what I never would have known otherwise.
You once made a comment to me, actually, that discovering the material, you actually met your mother as a teenager, which is
Yes,
a really lovely thought.
yes. I mean, how many people, thank you for bringing that up. How many people get, I know what I said. How many people get to read letters their mother wrote at age 19? I
Mm.
never knew her to be a silly young girl who would go to every party, cared about what she wore, hated mending stockings, and was frivolous and thought the world was her oyster. Because after what she saw and experienced and the war, that was not how she was.
Mhm.
I would never have known that that was her earlier personality, nor would I have known that she had wanted to become a journalist and that she heard Gandhi speak when she was a student at London School of Economics, and she submitted a paper, an article, and that was the first money she ever earned. And she offered to send it to her father. And then at the close of that letter, could you please send me money? Which, of course, I found endearing.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that really impressed me about your mother's story is when she was working for, well, first of all, how did she get to the United States? And the work she did in the United States as a young woman, English was not her native language. She traveled all over the country raising funds for Youth Aliyah to all kinds of communities alone. I mean, I am just taken by the courage that she had and the commitment she had to the mission. How did she get to the United States, and how did that all happen that she became really Henrietta Zold's right-hand woman for Youth Aliyah in the United States?
It's a wonderful question, Joan. I think Henrietta Szold identified my mother as a potential leader early on. She saw how she operated in her 20s as co-director of Berlin, and she wanted my mother to stay in Germany. But my mother had gone with her parents to America after the bank was Aryanized to raise funds for Jews, and then Kristallnacht happened. Her My mother's brother had joined the American Army. He had been banking here in this country and saw that the war was going to come. He urged my mother to get a visa so if she went back to Europe, she could always come to the United States. My mother went to Canada and got the last of two visas. That's the answer to that question. And in terms of the work she did for Hadassah, there weren't many Americans who had been in Germany, firsthand experience about what Youth Aliyah did. And even though she was in her 20s, she was a very good speaker and passionate. And she traveled as an enemy alien not allowed to fly to the 46 communities. And you're right, she was brave, she was committed, and she was passionate.
Yes. Well, you do have some beautiful family slides, and also slides of some of the source material you discovered in those boxes.
I'll be delighted to do that.
And to walk us through.
Yes. And okay, the first slide will be of the cover of the book. Next slide. Contemporaneous history, I stressed. This is a traditional portrait of Chaim Weizmann, which was a picture he dedicated to my mother. Next slide. A portrait that you may be familiar with of Henrietta Szold. Contained up in the attic were pictures my mother took when she was in Palestine and of these luminous figures. A picture of Chaim Weizmann in 1949 after he became president. It was the single trip my parents took to Israel together. And thereafter, my mother went 11 times. My father went to Paris. Next slide. A picture of Hans Bayeth, who was Henrietta Szold's right-hand man, and Henrietta Szold, taken in the 1940s. Next slide. This picture I'm going to spend a few minutes on. The man in the middle is Max Warburg, my grandfather, who was head of Warburg, as I said, the largest Jewish bank in Germany. But each of these men were truly unique and contributed enormously. It's really the great generation. To the right, or to my right, is A.B. Warburg. He was the oldest of the five brothers. And when he was 13, he turned to Max and he said, I don't want to be a banker. I want to be an art historian. I'd like to make a deal. My grandfather was 11. If you buy me every book and every picture I ever want, you can have the bank. And Max said, I'll do the deal, which he later said was the most expensive deal he ever made, because Aby created the art history library in Hamburg, which in 1933, because of Hitler, was transferred to the University of London. And today, many of you may know it as the Courtauld Warburg Institute in London. The man on the left, Paul Warburg, was Max's favorite brother and next in age to him. He was sent to America because he wasn't the first son or the second son, and the Warburgs wanted tentacles all over the world for banking. He is known and renowned for being the mover and truly the creator of the Federal Reserve that, as we know, continues to exist today. The man above Paul, Felix, married Dorothea Schiff, who was the daughter of the enormously generous philanthropist Jacob Schiff. Felix and Frida were committed Jews and Zionists. At the death of Frida, their mansion on Fifth Avenue, 1109, was given to become the Jewish Museum. And that is what it is today, and many of you are familiar with it. Fritz was the youngest and not very interested in banking. He loved people and he knew the names and stories of all the employees of Warburg where he worked. And he was a trustee of the Jewish hospital in Hamburg. And he went there on Kristallnacht to see whether they were all right. And he was picked up by the Gestapo and spent 5 months in a prison. And it was thanks to Warburg wealth that his freedom was purchased. And in 1939 or late 38, he went to Sweden. His wife was Swedish and spent the rest of the war there. Next slide. A picture of my mother and her favorite. She was one of four daughters. Her favorite sister was 4 years older, and they were treated like twins. And her name was Anita. So if you wonder why I'm named Anita, and I was also given the middle name of Henrietta. So as a little girl, it was Anita Henrietta Wyzanski. And I would say to my mother, it was a good thing I didn't lisp. I was not. And I was delighted that I found out that Henrietta didn't like her name. And I shared that with her. It was not a favorite name of mine. Next slide. This is a picture of my mother, the youngest munchkin here, with her sisters. Lala, who's the oldest, was the sister who had the affair with Chaim Weizmann. The sister way on the left, Renata, was married to a doctor who lost his practice when he could not see patients other than Jewish patients. And he became the personal physician for the Maharaja of Indore. And she spent 8 years in India with her husband during the years of the war. And Anita was in England, left Germany for England in 1937 and spent much of the war years there, and then moved to New York and took care of her parents. Next slide. A picture of my mother as an actress. In the grandparents had a wonderful 10,000-acre estate, and it's a picture of my mother performing in the amphitheater. There, all the cousins came during the summer, and it was like a huge summer camp with wonderful performances. And up in the attic are the scripts of those performances and the parts the different cousins played. Next slide. A picture of my mother on a camel in Alexandria. In 1929, her parents traveled, and she traveled from Germany to Italy to Sicily, boat across the Mediterranean to Alexandria, where she rode the camel, the Suez Canal to Cairo, and it didn't take them 40 years to cross the desert, just a day and a half. Next slide. When my mother returned from Palestine, she had the chutzpah and courage to write a paper, her thesis on Zionism, which is in the appendix of the book and on the website and in the archives of that will be at the Schlesinger Library of Harvard. It was the first time anybody wrote about Zionism, and my mother's teachers were early members of the Nazi Party. Next slide. A picture of my mother when she was a student at University of London and Oxford, where she spent just 1 year because her father in 1933 said, "You have to come back to Germany." She went to London because Chaim Weizmann was there and she wanted to learn English. She didn't spend a lot of time studying. She spent a lot of time hearing Weizmann argue in Parliament about the Passfield Papers, the White Papers. She went to Zionist meetings. She heard Gandhi speak, and she learned to smoke. She smoked Camels in England. She came to this country. It was Chesterfields, and after smoke enders, it was Marlboros, and her last cigarette was 2 days before she died. So she was a committed smoker, like Golda Meir and many other people of that era. Next slide. When my mother was urged by her father to come back to Germany, she worked at the bank as a secretary and went to a lot of Zionist meetings. But one of the things she liked about that period was her father sweetened the deal by giving her her beloved opal. Next slide. This is a picture of her exit visa in 1938 with a J. Next, please. This is how my mother looked as she crisscrossed the country in 1939 and was in love with Rudolph. Next slide. This is a picture of a letter written by my grandmother to my mother. Most of the correspondence, or much of the correspondence until my mother reached age 30, is in German. And all of the correspondence to her parents and from her parents is in German. It was a challenge to have them translated. And this is just an example of the challenge. Incidentally, the book is both in hardcover and audible. There are 4 actors playing 6 parts, and it really is like a play because the correspondence sounds like conversation, whether it's the courtship papers or the letters between Chaim and Gisela or Henrietta Szold and Gisela. I wanted to put so much of the historical documents into the book, but it didn't all fit. And here's an example of what didn't fit. My uncle had the opportunity to cross-examine Goering before the Nuremberg trial, and a copy of his cross-examination is in the website, which you access through the full name of the book, myfullname.com or mymother'sfullname.com. You will find over 100 pictures of the family. You'll find a full set of the letters and many other documents. But until the Schlesinger Library scans and catalogs the 2,000 plus documents, you can only see what's on the website. This is a picture of my mother's beloved governess. She was the 5th child, 4th daughter. Her mother was really quite absent from her life. This is Nuna, the beloved governess who was Catholic, religious, and my mother wrote in an oral memoir that was in the attic that everything good about her came from Nuna. And I think my mother dedicated her life to saving children because she knew what it was like to be motherless, because Nuna left the employment of the Warburgs when my mother was 7 because her husband was released from prison after World War I. And she took us back to Germany because she couldn't stand that Nuna had suffered during the war.
Thank you, Joan. Thank you, Anita. And we'll get back to you in just a little bit. This is what you audience have heard is just a little teaser of this wonderful book here. So we're going to put the link again in the chat box of how you too can order the book. And I certainly hope you will. So I'm going to make a few announcements now. And while I'm doing that, this is your opportunity to continue putting questions into that chat box. There are just a couple of questions, so please give me more questions to ask to our author. Okay, so let me tell you what we have upcoming here at the Sousa Mendes Foundation. So this summer we have 3 programs. We have today's program and 2 programs in August. August 23rd and August 30th, both Sundays, of course. So on Sunday, August 23rd, we are presenting a pretty remarkable story. It's a film discussion, and the film is called To Kill a Nazi. It's the story of a very unlikely hero named Michel Cojeau, who was a child in France during the Nazi occupation of France. His father was deported from Lyon, and in Lyon, the terrible Gestapo head is the man we've all heard of, Klaus Barbie. So when our hero Michel Cojeau grew up, after losing his father to deportation and having his father killed at Auschwitz, Michel vowed to track down and kill Klaus Barbie. This became his obsession. So the film is a true story, and it takes you into Michel's history and how he was able to track down Klaus Barbie, and it's quite an unbelievable story. And then the story takes a remarkable turn when suddenly our hero Michel Cojeau finds himself on an Air France flight that, guess what, was the very flight that was hijacked to Entebbe. And then he becomes one of the heroes of the Entebbe raid. So it's an unbelievable story, completely unique. And we have as our guests the filmmaker, and we have the son of Michel Cojeau, who was also on that airplane and who was himself, therefore, a child hostage at Entebbe. It's a program you will not want to miss. That is on August 23rd. On August 30th, we're presenting another book. It's this one called The Art Spy. This is the story of Rose Valland, who was a museum curator, and she was pressed into service by the Nazis, who had requisitioned the Jeu de Paume Museum in Paris, where they put the looted artwork of all the Jewish families. And they didn't know that Rose understood German. She, in fact, understood it fluently, and she was keeping mental notes. And at night, she would go home and write down the entire history of every painting that she had seen that day and where that painting was going. And after the war, she became essential to the activities of the monuments men in recovering lost, stolen works from Jewish families. So it's an unbelievable cloak and dagger story. The Art Spy, another program you will not want to miss. And we are offering signed and inscribed copies of this book. So you can already place your order if you're interested in that. We'll put the link in the chat box. And right now we're going to see a little trailer of the film that we're showing on August 23rd, To Kill a Nazi.
Ou le hasard ou la destinée a voulu que je me retrouve à bord de cet avion d'Air France.
The plane takes off. And all of a sudden, somebody gets up and screams fire. And then you see two people who each have a hand grenade and a gun.
As most of those on board Flight 139 panicked, one passenger remained strangely calm. Michel Cojeau, a French business consultant, harbored deep doubts about a decision he made the previous year. Michel was haunted by his father's disappearance during World War II.
Goldberg is put on a train going towards Auschwitz.
Le père de Michel mort à Auschwitz.
Michel identified the Gestapo officer who arrested his father.
Klaus Barbie, who was nicknamed the Butcher of Lyon, was the head of the Gestapo there.
Je me suis résolu de le rencontrer pour le tuer.
He would practice gun shooting in the backyard.
Et il dit cette phrase qui, moi, m'a beaucoup marquée. Klaus Barbie était là devant moi, je voulais l'assassiner.
C'est là qu'il a changé.
He grabbed the first plane he could find.
Michel flew to Tel Aviv with his 12-year-old son, Olivier.
They announced while we were in the plane that we were going to do a stop in Athens, in Greece.
Athens was known to be a very dangerous place.
The 1970s were the golden age of hijacking.
And our plane was hijacked to Entebbe in Uganda.
Michel viewed the hijacking as his once-in-a-lifetime second chance.
That's at the point at which Cojeau steps forward.
Mais je dirais que Entebbe était fait pour des gens comme moi.
The Entebbe episode is a chance for him to do the right thing, but in a positive way, not taking someone's life, saving someone's life.
The raid of Entebbe is one of the most important special operations of all time, and Cojeau was absolutely crucial to its success.
I was so shocked, and I knew this story.
C'était vraiment un extraordinaire clin d'œil de l'histoire.
So you will be getting an email after today's program telling you how to sign up for these programs. So now let's get to your questions. So Anita, there's a question about the kinder transport, and I know that your mother and your aunt worked with Wilfred Israel. So the question is, can you give us more details? And specifically, our listener wants to know, can you talk about how the kinder transport was organized and how children were chosen and placed with families and what your mother's role was in all that?
That's a wonderful question and would take a long time to fully answer. My mother's role was to work for both Youth Aliyah and kinder transport. The children who were saved by kinder transport were not all Youth Aliyah children. In fact, it was quite a small percentage. They were the children identified as in most need of saving from various countries. And they ranged in age from very young to much older than Youth Aliyah would have dealt with in the old days. And in terms of my mother's role, it was to try to see what places looked like that were proposed, like Lord Balfour proposed his summer estate for all the boys who could not be housed by, quote, foster families. They were not chosen. So they were put to work as farmhands. And it was basically seeing what was being done with each child, and it was not well run. My mother wrote a long letter to Hadassah, really saying how challenged the British were to all of a sudden deal with 10,000 children and no infrastructure and no experience, and many of them didn't speak the language of their children.
Yeah. Next question. So every time Gisela manages to leave Nazi Germany, her father summons her back home. She's pursuing her studies in English. In England in 1932, suddenly Hitler rises to power, and her father calls her back to Germany. Later, she goes on a youth Aliyah mission to Jerusalem. She has the opportunity to stay, but again, her father summons her back to Nazi Germany. Can you explain this?
I think the explanation is that he, as many Germans and many, if I can say so, Americans we didn't understand who Trump would become. Max Warburg didn't understand who Hitler would become. He really thought that with the cultural history of a Germany, that it would be a passing phase. And it wasn't, obviously. And he didn't really grasp how difficult it would be over time and what would happen. And clearly the first years of Hitler, his mission was dispossessing Jews, not murdering them with a final solution. It was very gradual, the way he took over the democracy. So he is, as many other people, didn't anticipate what would happen.
But somehow your mother had a clarity that her father lacked or didn't want to see.
Well, she had a clarity about the importance of how exciting a place like Palestine was for a young person to create a nation, not even a nation, but a homeland.
Next question. In the Youth Aliyah movement, there was a rivalry between the founder, Recha Freier, who is one of our playing card heroes in our Heroes of the Holocaust.
Oh, I see.
And Henrietta Szold. Was your mother at all caught up in this rivalry? Did she know Recha Freier?
Yes, she knew Recha Freier. There was a letter from Recha Freier, but she was a young person in 1932 when it was formed. She was in her 20s. She joined after it was formed. She knew about the much of the difficulties of Youth Aliyah trying to be an independent organization, separate and apart from Hadassah, who was the largest funder of Youth Aliyah. Recha Freier, at that point, that my mother worked with Henrietta Szold was not a major force in youth Aliyah. There were many other more important actors and actresses arguing with Henrietta Szold.
Did your mother keep in contact with any of the children that she helped to rescue? Were there any letters from them in the archive you discovered in your attic? Have you met any of them?
The answer is yes to both questions. And at my first book reading, I had the unbelievable experience of having a woman come up and say, I heard about your book talk, and I'm here because my mother was saved by your mother in Youth Aliyah. And I'm with another woman whose mother was saved by the Kinder Transport. So the answer is yes. And with the book talks, I am meeting more and more of such people, and it's absolutely astounding.
In the course of your going through your mother's documents, did you come across the name of Ida Flatow? She worked closely with Henrietta Szold, spent a year or two in Palestine in the early 30s, and she's related to someone in our audience.
I wish I could say yes, but the answer is no, I did not.
Okay. Does the Warburg Bank exist today in any country?
It exists exactly in the same building that it existed in pre-Hitler days. Ferdinandstrasse. My uncle went back to reclaim the bank, and it was returned over a decade of effort to being M.M. Warburg, and some of what my grandfather lost was in some form or other returned, but a great deal never, and a lot was donated to the town of Blankenese. And the answer is yes, it survives, and there's a Warburg Bank in New York, and their tentacles today around the world again.
Okay. Another question. You've put together a terrific website of your mother's archives, reproducing original photographs and documents, and providing English translations where needed. For those members of our audience who are teachers, do you have a suggestion as to how this website might be used in the classroom?
Well, that's a great question, and I am hoping to do a sequel to this book that will be geared to high school, to youth audiences, because I think it is a story that needs to be told to younger people. And in terms of how it can be useful to high schoolers today, I think because it's contemporary history, it's riveting in a way in which much of history written after the fact is dry. It's wonderful reading.
We have in our audience the great-granddaughter of Felix Warburg, who would like to be in touch with you.
I would be delighted.
So we can facilitate that if she writes to us, because there's no email address. So why don't you write to info@susanmendesfoundation.org, and we will connect you, Carola Leah.
I know exactly who that is. Thank you. Yes, Carola Leah, please do connect with me.
Okay. Someone wants to know what kind of mother your mother was to you.
The last part of the book is a postscript where I was asked to write about what writing this biography meant to me. And it really isn't a very full description of my mother, but it does describe that my mother in many ways was wonderful, but I used to say, why aren't you more like other American mothers? And why, she didn't take very seriously the woes of a teenager. I mean, she had seen too much. And when she said to finish everything on my plate, I said, I don't want to. Well, the people in China are starving the children. I said, well, then send it to them. So I didn't exactly always think that her thoughts were the best, nor did she think mine were the best. It was, the usual mother-daughter differences. But I did love knowing who she was when she was younger, and I really feel that I understand my mother so much better as a result of having the opportunity to write this book.
So we'll give you an opportunity to make some final thoughts in a minute. Right now, I want to urge all of our audience members to buy your book. We're going to put the link in the chat box one more time so that you can all buy your copy of this terrific book. So now, Anita, let me invite you to make whatever final remarks you would like to say to our audience today.
Okay. I'd like to say my book has a lot of history in it. It's interwoven with my mother's life story. But I want to share with you one of the most interesting facts that I came across that is not well known. And I'm going to talk fast because I don't have very many minutes. In 1933, the United States passed Social Security Act. And for the first time, the federal government had to collect the data of potential beneficiaries of Social Security. They put out a bid, they asked for contracts to be submitted, bid contracts, and there was a small company called IBM, a fledgling little company, and it was run by Tom Watson, who was a buddy of FDR's. He was not as anti-Semitic as Henry Ford, but he was a bit of an anti-Semite. He bid on the contract, and IBM got the contract to list the employees, the names of their wives, where they live, their ages, etc. And that is what put IBM on the map. They became the go-to company for computer needs by the federal government. Well, Hitler knew about this data program that they had created and came to Tom Watson in 1933 asking if he would do a data program for concentration camps. How many political inmates, how many Jews, how many gypsies, etc. Watson went to FDR and said, "Can I accept this contract?" And FDR said, "Well, the Neutrality Act does not bar it. It is only armaments, goods, and services." And this is not, and Watson said it's not goods or services, it's data cards, etc. So IBM prepared a program. How many prisoners escaped, how many died, etc. In 1934, Hitler came again. Would IBM please record where Jews lived, their names, ages, number of children, and their wealth? So one of the reasons Hitler had such fabulous records was because of IBM. IBM worked for the Allies and the Axis powers. And today we have many companies, American companies, working for dictators and autocrats across the world. And it's unfortunate, but it's true even today. So I'd like to leave you with that piece of knowledge.
That's a terrible, very sobering thought.
That's yes.
I'm grateful for the new information, as I'm sure our audience is as well. So thank you, Anita, for writing this book and for gracing us today with your presence. Joan Goodman, you were a fabulous interviewer. Thank you very much for your role in today's hour. Thank you to our audience. We'll see you in August 23rd, To Kill a Nazi, the Michel Cojeau story, and then August 30th, The Art Spy. So see you soon. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everybody. Be well. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.